Okay, hi, good to see everyone, and thanks for inviting us to give this presentation. I'm going to share a screen, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed because my internet connection is not the optimal today. I'm really sorry about this. There's a storm here and everything, so in case I'm breaking off, Sabine will continue sharing it, so let's hope it will work out somehow. So, are you seeing my screen?
Yes.
Yes, we see the presentation in the editing mode.
And how about now?
Yes. Everything looks good.
Okay, is it in the presentation mode?
Yes.
Okay. So, hi everyone. My name is Tanja Sihvonen. I'm a professor of communication studies at the University of Vasa, and this is a joint project between me and my PhD student Mona Khattab, who couldn't be here today. She's actually traveling to Egypt as we speak. And then we have Sabine Harrer, who is a senior lecturer / associate professor at the University of Uppsala. So this is a kind of Finnish-Swedish collaboration. I'm sorry, I had to say that. I know that's wrong, but since we're talking about nationalities and stereotypes, and it's kind of funny. So of course, we are very honored to be here at Frog, and we've been here before at Frog. And I have to say personally that I've really enjoyed today's program with a lot of queer game studies, inspired presentations and topics. They've been super informative and delightful to follow. So I'm kind of overwhelmed with this kind of luxurious situation of having all these beautiful talks in front of me. And I'm like, we are the last slot in this session, I guess. So we're trying to do our best in keeping up with the time and stuff. So I'm trying to move my own face from the text. Okay, so our title today is Narrative Transformations and Cultural Appropriation. So we're going to talk about Assassin's Creed Origins, and specifically its Discovery Tour mode. So everybody who's familiar with the Assassin's Creed Origins game, please raise your hand in the reactions. I guess the recording will save those reactions as well, and we'll look at them later. I am just very curious in knowing how many of you know this game and its Discovery Tour mode. A couple of words about this project in general. So this started as an idea by Mona, actually, because she's Egyptian, and she mentioned that in this game she felt that Egypt, some aspects of the history of Egypt were portrayed in a kind of funny way or something like that. I'm hoping I'm not paraphrasing her wrongly here. And then I got interested in kind of thinking about how is Egypt portrayed, you know, throughout Western imagination, throughout centuries, and especially in the past 100 years, and whether that continues still with this game. This is an article project, I guess, so we are very happy to hear about your experiences with this game and with the ideas presented here. So everything is very preliminary at this stage, so please share your thoughts. So a couple of words about the game itself. This game is part of the Assassin's Creed games, which started in 2007, made by Ubisoft Montreal. And this particular game was launched in 2018. And what we are looking at here in this presentation and in our future article, I hope, is the Discovery Tour mode specifically, which is a DLC to the original game. It's a kind of free roamable area where you can, a piece of content where you can roam the game area sort of using different kind of characters. So it's not part of the actual game itself, which is an an action adventure game based on stealth technique and things like that. Many people know it's about combat and exploration and conquering the space. So this particular game takes place in ancient Egypt, the Ptolemaic era. And Ubisoft has said that their purpose in making the DLC, the Discovery Tour mode, was making history everybody's playground. So they want to create a space where you can traverse and experience it and enjoy the scenery and looking at what the historical figures actually looked like, what they were doing, how their daily life was, and sort of understand that from a different perspective. What we are interested in this project is a concept we call placemaking, and we considered it as the technology for virtual and identity tourism. And Sabine is going to explain this in a short while. Our argument in this paper is basically, I'm going to read this aloud. Due to its quasi-touristic staging of an ancient civilization, the Discovery Tour mode is a particularly potent feature in exploring how games render history palatable for an implied white Western audience. What this means in practice is that, very briefly, the vista and the perspective that the players presented with this game is a kind of beautiful landscape, beautiful historical landscape, ready to be explored and investigated and enjoyed upon, of course, in different ways, but also as a site for sort of self-discovery in a way that you're supposed to take on different identities in the game, and especially the Discovery Tour mode, and experience the landscape through the characters of, what we're going to go to details in a bit later. One aspect of this game and of the placemaking, especially in this game, is that it aims at showing the everyday life of people as it was in 300 to 30 BCE. And how it does that is a question that we want to raise. So a quick word about the background of the Assassin's Creed series. So we discovered that the whole idea of the assassin, of the figure of the assassin, is based on this Slovenian author Vladimir Bartol and his novel from 1938, which was actually translated in English as late as 2004. So there has been quite many decades of literary discussion and criticism of this novel. I guess this is actually quite familiar to a number of you, because especially in Central Europe, it's supposed to be quite famous. So he's got this idea that the assassins were specifically skilled sort of conquerors and soldiers who had special skill sets and who were sort of psyched to act against their foreign powers that were trying to suppress them. And his novel has been read as an allegory of nationalism and rising totalitarianism in Europe. So actually, which is quite interesting for us, is that the basis for the whole Assassin's Creed games is very European. So if we look at the Assassin's Creed origins more specifically, it sort of places the game character as this person who enters a realm of mystic atmosphere and exotic locations and all these scriptures that are not readable and things like that. So it clearly shows that it's an external person, an outsider entering a realm of exoticism. And this is what it looks like in practice, the Discovery Tour mode. So it gives you a bird's eye view of pyramids, of the structure of the place, of locations, of cities and villages, people's homes, giving On the left-hand side, there's a short description of what you're seeing, and these particular buildings were built and things like that, how the structures were formed. This is the Sphinx, for instance. And here you can already see the kind of Western look at the Sphinx, because this is the description, and how we are seeing the Sphinx is more based on, you know, Napoleon and his soldiers' doings than the Sphinx itself, or the, you know, or the origins or the Egyptian story of the Sphinx. This is a normal Egyptian house and its household, westernized for our view. And this is the list of characters, just to show you, give you an idea of what kind of characters you can choose for your Discovery tour. So there are absolute historical celebrities like Julius Caesar and Cleopatra, of course. And then there are sort of local common people who have names and who have a role in the game's narrative. But then there are also characters which are even which remain unnamed. So there's a character option of an unnamed Egyptian woman or an unnamed Egyptian man that you can choose to be your kind of avatar in entering this world. And Sabina, you want to take over?
Yes, sure. I'm going to take over from here and just run you through the levels of placemaking that we have been looking at, and also the implications for the cultural implications that we see in this. Also, especially as white researchers entering this space and being allowed into this game. So the first level concerns the representation of Egypt, especially its role as an exotic other in the game. The second level looks at the centrality of avatars and kind of the characters already mentioned available for players during the Discovery Tour. And here we look at the way players take possession of virtual characters and what in game studies has been discussed as identity tourism. And the third level addresses the narrativity and cultural representation as it's expressed in the spatial organization of the Discovery Tour. And here we look at how the game's placemaking constructs a museum gaze, which repeats conventions which we already know from stagings of history or educational settings that are about history, which appear as seemingly objective. So next slide, please. Tanya, if you can move to the next. Yes, so what does the Egypt as the exotic other? So what does this mean? So in its presentation of Egypt, the game straddles a fine line between presenting Egypt as this mysterious, exotic place, while also putting players in control of that space by allowing us to traverse it and to kind of become native, right? This strategy of creating a binary between a center, the player in control, and the periphery, an exoticized environment, has been widely discussed in post-colonial game studies, especially by Indian game scholar Suvik Mukherjee. And the Ascension Discovery Tour mode mobilizes this convention of othering by turning a well-known and well-historicized place into a gamic environment. For us, this also raises the question of consequences for the players. And this is also where Mona's perspective comes in, because since Egypt is portrayed as essentially other, what does this mean for players who are from Egypt, for who Egypt is their home, right? So who is the space made for, and who is it excluding through this assigned exotification? Moving on to the avatar, yes, here you see one of the avatars. The Discovery Tour allows players to choose one of many avatars that you have seen before from a selection of authentic, so quote unquote authentic historical celebrities, including Cleopatra and Julius Caesar. And So this selection happens freely and with no real consequence to the game mechanics itself. So the characters are mere decoration, and avatars can also be wildly changed throughout the game. There's basically no consequence during the discovery tour. So from a spatial perspective, it is interesting how we as players take possession of these bodies. First, it's noticeable that most of the avatars available are bodies of color. So when moving around, we take possession of these bodies, and the third person camera frames them as our bodies and therefore as our subjective experience, as a way of walking in their shoes. When introducing the historical fact sheets that we've seen before with the pyramids and the sphinxes, the game camera moves upwards, and so we basically leave the body of the avatar, and this frames history as an objective thing beyond the control of us or these characters. And we were wondering, given that the franchise is played by quite a number of white Western gamers, how do these avatars facilitate what Lisa Nakamura has called identity tourism, which is a kind of well-intentioned racist practice where white uses appropriate non-white avatars in stereotypical ways, often without meaning harm, obviously. A similar expression for this in the literature is digital blackface, which refers to the use of black images and voices by non-white voices of non-white people for the sake of the entertainment of white people. So theoretically, a white gamer could resist this racist practice by choosing a white avatar only, but the game offers a wide selection of non-white bodies on the equally available to everyone. So finally, we talk about the connection of narrativity and cultural representation, and how, for instance, the US-American voiceover helps players make sense of the historical environment. This voice kind of uses the mechanics of a guided museum tour, a convention that we know very well from educational spaces and museum spaces. The voice is supposedly neutral, and so it's charged with authority and a kind of narrator who certainly only gives us the facts about history, and who certainly only gives us the necessary information we need to know about this place, all we need to know. So throughout each tour, a golden line, we saw this before in one of the slides, is showing us the way and provides us with touristic highlights on the way. And these highlights kind of structure the place for optimal consumption by Western audiences. Such audiences, including ourselves, we're well familiar with conventions from audio tours and museums, where we engage in our learning through a convenient breakdown of facts into small compartmentalized information bits. And so the learning can happen in an orderly fashion, in a quantifiable way, which is therefore accessible to us and made for us. So I'm handing back over to Tanya. Who is muted, I think, for some reason.
Now I'm unmuted again. Hi.
Hi.
I think you can hear me now. Okay. So just to summarize real quickly, because I think that our time is up. The previous slide was actually about what is called grave exploration or something like that in the game, but which in practice is grave robbing. So that's a fantastic example again of something which is presented as an innocent kind of practice of just exploring and looking what's there, and just seeing things, while it's actually, of course, the lore of Egypt, ancient Egypt, is very much based on kind of these undiscovered graves, which are then then discovered and robbed essentially for Western pleasures in museums and so on. So basically, our research goal in this article is stated in this last slide. Our research project, our study is based on textual analysis of these kinds of game objects and environments, such as the Sphinx, pyramids and the graves, and of course the normal households and streets and these kinds of environments as well. On the other hand, we are doing autoethnographic observation through gameplay in seeing how characters and places and scenarios are named and depicted for the gamers' pleasures. And then finally, we're doing geographical investigation of real-world locations to understand how they have been turned into reappropriated game places. So in order to understand how history is repurposed for the purposes of the game, so to speak. So for our viewing pleasures or for our playing pleasures, we have to see how the game is made to function in that role. And ultimately, we are interested in asking what cultural standpoints and play identities does the game cater to, and who is excluded and othered, as Sabine mentioned. And in the end, we hope to problematize the common discourse, a very common discourse about Assassin's Creed Origins as an instructive tool for learning about history. Because when I did a little bit of research for this presentation, I noticed that in a lot of game reviews and even all kinds of investigative essays as well, it is quite unanimously considered as a very good tool to learn about history and learn about ancient Egypt, and it's quite unproblematized in its depiction of these things, which is absolutely not true, as we hope to have shown. Here are a couple of last pictures, which we don't have time to go into, but of course, it is on some superficial level, it is an educational tool, but we hope to raise critical points about this, especially concerning the how people and locations and their daily life habits are discussed in the game. One example of this is the hiding of strategic places in nude statues, which is apparently done in the game, because nude statues are somehow problematic. Please explain to me how, but for someone they have been problematic, so they have been masked and censored like this, as you can see in this picture. There was also another screenshot about this. So this is a great symbol for our project, actually. So here is the conclusion. Thank you so much for listening.